Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Monday, May 22nd, starting really late and frankly just getting distracted like crazy. I'm playing that Star Trek Lower Decks game on my phone and I'm still early enough in the game that will eventually boil down to a lot of set it and forget it type gameplay, but that takes a while. So yeah, Lower Decks doesn't have daily quests or anything like Yu-Gi-Oh! So once you're just built your 5 or 6 buildings that would produce you resources to upgrade the building some more, there's not going to be that much more you can do. Let's see. Probably didn't log in one day over the weekend. I didn't probably do a duel live over the weekend. I must have played a little bit over the weekend though, because obviously we have some progress made, but mostly over the weekend I forgot everything about this World Championship Series, or whatever it is. Like here we have one pack we can open, which no, I guess we don't even have one pack. It's deceptive. Here we'll open 10 packs here and skip this, and then we should just hop into the game fairly quickly. Of course, a major reason why I'm starting late also is just I'm waking up incredibly later. I did manage to stay up in the middle of the night and do some Lego DC Supervillains. It's pretty incredibly slow though, as far as what I'm doing, just running around the open world, collecting gold bricks and unlocking a few characters. If anything, I really would have wanted there to be a lot more to do. So yeah, this ends in 7 days. As far as getting up to rank 20, and I'm not sure if in 7 days that's also the end of the regional qualifiers, which I would probably revise my thoughts here that I probably won't even make it to the regional qualifiers. Meanwhile, ranked play is being ignored completely for the rest of the month. Which, yeah, we saw that coming. I probably, in non-YouTube news, have talked about to death the idea of putting smart LED 2812B Christmas lights, fairy lights up around my house. Like, I had gotten them right after Christmas, and then I needed to find a ladder and get somebody to climb a ladder, basically, to put them around my house. And then within maybe a week or two of them being put around the house, like you would hang regular Christmas lights, they broke. And I don't know what really caused it to break. It seems fairly obvious that at least one strand had at least one diode short out or break in some way that caused a cascading effect of the rest of the strand to break. And at some point that burnt out the controller. That being said, I switched the controller to the backup controller because, like, I had another one, and the backup controller in less than a week also is showing signs that it is broken, which makes me suspect, although this isn't really a good solution or as to what went wrong, but it makes me suspect that since I had 2 controllers and 2 light strands, that there was something in the actual transistor chips designed to only last a couple of months, and that whether it was plugged in or whether it wasn't plugged in, it was just going to short out very quickly after just the Christmas season, which is a possibility for a vast majority of all like Christmas lights, like, because you can easily be a fly-by-night company to sell Christmas lights, and then have them last one season in the coldest months of the season, and you really don't have to make any level of quality that it would last the next year, because you'll long be gone by that next year. And that's exactly the case. Is the smart Christmas lights that I bought are not available for purchase. The company's just gone, which is more of an indication that there was probably a high failure rate there. But yeah, so the whole project is back to square one, and now I'm in the middle of the year where Christmas lights are not very available, so there's considerably less options. I would say the 2812Bs, which run on 5 volts as far as LEDs, are probably the absolute worst decision to use, even though they are pushed as far as room lighting quite a bit. I just, in a lot of ways, I think there's probably room for a whole new generation of LED strips that are individually addressable. But something going at 12 volts, 30 volts, something at a much higher voltage makes a lot more sense for any even medium-sized runs. If you're doing less than 30 feet of LEDs, you're probably fine. And if you were using 28Bs and doing more than that, like more than 1 or 2 strips of, then you probably are getting into the realm of power injection, which that's another thing I tried to do, is get the power injection to work, and noticeably the power injection concept was not working either on the strand that's still up and sort of working. It's sort of working because the first few lights are lit up correctly, but then at a certain point the lights just start to flicker, and then at a certain point the lights start to do something completely random. So it is definitely a case that the controller is broken too, but the light strip may be broken. So yeah, I can't help but feel like that was a pretty failed project. That now I'm in kind of a quagmire, which I've had a lot of projects go that route lately. Like, I don't know if I'm getting old or I've just been unlucky, but yeah. Also, my router, though, does seem to be working fairly well. I finally, through basically brute forcing it, figured out how to get the old key pairs, private keys and public keys for WireGuard, to be inputted into the new router, because you can't do that via the graphical user interface, which is probably intentional, but also it's just a thing. Ironically, I just installed an ASUS router, and there was a whole story in which the ASUS routers had automatic firmware updates enabled, apparently by default, if you're using the default firmware, And then Asus pushed a firmware that broke basically all the routers. So, yeah, I don't know if I would really trust Asus overall. Seems like it's a big company that does a bunch of different kinds of things. And if anything, having to pick an Asus router just points to the fact that there's not as many options as you would like as far as manufacturers of small home office routers. Anyways, I also yesterday had a surprise burst of successfulness in cleaning out a room significantly, and now it will just be a matter of seeing if that leads to more cleanliness and organization. I guess a bit of spring cleaning came upon me, which I guess all in all that's to say that over the weekend I did not a lot. I did play Lego DC Supervillains, but that's not catching my attention much. I uploaded some videos. I made some YouTube shorts. I need to upload more YouTube shorts. I need to constantly get better at doing that anyways. I also had a thought that I might work on at some point in the future, in that when we get to the end section of these streams and I start looking at all the video games that came out on Steam, including the adult games, I could probably have some introductory web page warning page that says something along the lines of new games on Steam, and it could just be a web page, and it could say at the bottom, warning, this includes adult games, and displayed in a blurred manner, and will include frank consumer advice and discussion as to the content of adult games. And I could certainly take that idea and expand it, and there could be a whole accountability section webpage. And if I make it a web page and put it in my macro, then I don't have to have any kind of special scene in OBS or anything like that. Now, of course, that would require being some artsy-fartsy, which I have no artistic skill, which my lack of thumbnails can attest to. Oh, that was another thing. As I was uploading videos on YouTube, YouTube often asks for a survey, and so I clicked on one that says fill out the survey as far as new features, and the first real question it asked, after asking just generally identifiable information, as far as are you male, female, how many videos do you upload, how old are you, things like that. The first question was, do you plan to in the future use either an iPad or an iOS or an Android phone to edit your videos? And I said no, and it says you don't qualify for the survey immediately, which is a little bit scary because it implies to me that they potentially are trying to get internal results to justify getting rid of editing videos on desktop, which is insane because the only good way to edit videos on YouTube, even slightly good, it's not particularly great, is on desktop. And that certainly would be within the trend that they're just constantly trying to get TikTokers and young kids that don't have desktops to do everything on their phone. which will just lead to a lower quality of editing. Which, there's a lot of editing on most people's content on YouTube. There's zero editing on my content, really, but yeah, there's a lot of removal of ums and ahs and getting to the point and cutting down what could have been easily 3 or 4 times as long of a video to that 10-minute phase. And that was another question on the survey, is like, what was the average length of your videos, and 10 minutes was the maximum. And I just don't get YouTube's logic, and I just don't think there really is logic there, in that you definitely have a situation where they limit you to uploading 15 videos per batch. You're limited to uploading somewhere around 75 to 100 videos per day. And then there's a heavy push for videos to be 10 minutes long. And that just doesn't work for gamers and Let's Players. And it doesn't work for a lot of other people who have long since failed on YouTube, I'm sure. But it seems crazy to have the double limits of not being able to upload, say, 80 videos at a time in one batch, if that's going to be your daily limit. And it really doesn't make sense that you're not being limited by a certain amount of time. It would take a little bit more work to figure out how to schedule that, and say, we see you just uploaded a video that was an hour long, so that's going to be reduced from your 4-hour per day quota of uploads. It could certainly be by size too, instead of hourly. Of course, that would allow a lot of people to potentially cheat and put up incredibly small videos and make thousands of those. But overall, having any limit only very minimally slows down people just uploading content that there isn't theirs, or just uploading massive amounts of garbage, which I don't know where you would draw the line, particularly to say what's garbage on YouTube. Well, was there anything else to talk about as far as today? Nothing other than I really need to remove one of the games I'm playing. I was kind of shocked today to see that Marvel Snap's Quick Look came out. I hope that means I have some other stuff scheduled to air. Otherwise, that I've dropped the ball after today. So I'll check that. But there definitely is a problem in that, because we are 6 months basically past the launch of Marvel Snap, maybe 5 months, maybe 4, and me doing a spotlight of the game when it was brand new would have made a lot more sense, and anything I said in that spotlight is going to be very, very inaccurate with what Marvel Snap is now. So yeah, I don't know if there's any real value in having made that spotlight and putting it out so late. Maybe I live streamed that too, and this is just the pre-recorded one, that would have been the smarter thing to do for a brand new game. Which typically I don't play brand new games, so it doesn't matter if I'm doing a look at that. I think this is also the first instance of me using the phrase quick look and just straight up stealing that from Giant Bomb, which I guess they have made that like Kleenex or tissue in that it's just a generic phrase. Well, in all fairness, it was a generic phrase even before Giant Bomb started using it. So it might be very surprising if all of a sudden the Marvel Snap Quick Look gets a ton of views. And I would say, if I only very vaguely recall what I said, but I suspect more people will agree with my opinion on Marvel Snap now than they would have when it first launched. Because I know people were super hyped on Marvel Snap originally, and I was much more critical and negative on Marvel Snap because it definitely did not feel like much of a game. And I feel like people now, outside of hype, will have to really agree it isn't much of a game. And the only real thing Marvel Snap has changed since its initial launch is it's added tokens and tried to make it a little bit easier to get more cards faster. But it's still a very grindy experience to get variant art on the same cards. And one of the major problems of Marvel Snap 2 is if you play one main deck, you're highly likely to only get boosters for those cards in that main deck. So you're going to have some cards that are going to have considerably large amounts of variance as far as the art. So I have like 1 or 2 cards that have like 4 or 5 different artistic variants, and then I have a lot of cards that just have no boosters at all to make different artistic variants. And you have to engage with these different skins of cards to make this work. I am getting a lot of victories. Maybe this is something I did to my network, but I'm going to enjoy it for the time being. This may also just be a lot of people surrendering very quickly. Yeah, one of the things I noticed about my WireGuard setup is that very specific websites were not loading up. DuckDuckGo was an example of that. So I got the WireGuard working. I know it was accessing most websites, and I was thinking maybe something about my AdGuard Home ad blocking was slowing it down, and maybe it was, but I don't think so. And in the end, it turned out to be the maximum transmission unit. I had set it to 1440, which on my old router I guess that was fine, but just letting it auto negotiate and disabling that setting seems to be the smarter move. That being said, there might be an argument to reducing it to maybe even 1400 or lower. There is a WAN MTU on the Asus router that can be adjusted, but there is no internal settings to adjust the MTU for specifically the WireGuard server. Which that is both the blessing and the curse of getting away from something like OpenWRT or DDWRT, is that there's just going to be a lot less settings that you can change, thus a lot less settings that can cause you problems. none of this has anything to do with video games, so I've really got to get away from this intro stuff. Just it really is down to just deceptive advertising, or just straight up rambling at the beginning of these streams. Like, and again, I guess if this is the pre-show portion, I could get away with that. But perhaps I should better advertise this as the pre-show portion. And frankly, it doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about the it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a pre-show portion when you're running late and you're starting late anyways. Let's see. Ravensoft here, which has apparently changed its banner to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Island Heritage Month, put out this updates. Upon further consideration with our partners at Treyarch, we made the decision to disable proximity voice chat and global text chat in Warzone ranked play. Minor update went live a few moments ago to implement this change. So, in ranked play, it seems like proximity voice chat and global text chat was probably affecting the legitimacy of the ranked play, which makes sense. I could see people talking to each other on different teams with proximity chat, or broadcasting their locations in global text chat to smurf quite a bit or cheat in some other way. I guess what I would say, as somebody particularly who doesn't play these kinds of games, it seems to me like there's a lot of room for adding different features and moving away from being so focused around chat and in first-person shooters. Because there's this obvious impasse here in which you see a lot of these game developers make these military first-person shooters, and then they have now, over the years, just devolved into saying everybody who plays their game is a toxic cretin who needs to be censored as much as possible in their chat, and even in personal chats and fringe chats. So, I mean, it really is a problem they created for themselves by having chat in the first place, whereas any single-player game isn't going to have chat, obviously. And I think plenty of other multiplayer games don't have chats. When you start to think about, like, sports games and things like that, I don't think there's really a necessary reason to take a Madden game and have voice chat in the multiplayer, or take a fighting game and have voice chat in the multiplayer there. It really is just these military first-person shooter things. Honestly, I'm not sure that there's even that many chat features when you get into non-military first-person shooters experiences. You'd kind of think that, like, Borderlands, if it had a bunch of chat in it, would have been a place where you would have gotten a lot of trash talking and nonsense and stuff like that. But I guess in the case of Borderlands in particular, at least Borderlands 1, I don't think you could talk to the characters at all. You would just run up and slap them to start a duel, and that was it. So you had to talk with a much more limited amount of gestures and actions, jumping up and down, squatting, pointing with your rifle one direction or the other. Like, gamers have certainly been making do with games that didn't have chat for a very long time. I would have to push it further to make the accusation too that most of these military first-person shooter games, like Warzone, are also just completely soulless, mindless, cookie-cutter games, and that's why they don't have any ideas to make any new features, really. And at a certain level, that's fine too. You look at Counter-Strike Go, like doesn't look like there's probably been a new feature of importance added to Counter-Strike Go in years, but it satisfies its audience by delivering on the things that they do want. So I guess that might be just a long-winded way of saying the industry should probably just get together and say, hey, we're just not going to have chat in first-person shooters or in ranked play of any games. Yu-Gi-Oh! Here, this is a player versus player experience. They have not bothered to do anything like a chat, and that has worked perfectly fine. There aren't people foaming at the bit to add chat to Yu-Gi-Oh! If you want chat, then you can play Yu-Gi-Oh! In the real world. It's kind of a shame in general that that's a popular enough series that I have to talk about it as much as I do, because honestly, Call of Duty, Warzone, Medal of Honor might be another one. Yeah. Let's see. Destiny 2 is another one. Like, all of those games are games that I really wish I could never talk about again, because they're fairly boring and not my style. Is there a real reason to activate this effect? There might be an quest to activate characters' effects, so I'm just going to activate the effect twice here. We have a GameDeveloper.com article here that caught my eye. Nintendo has been sued over Mario Kart Tour's quite, quote, immoral microtransaction. This is probably not what Nintendo expected to roll. The young players filed a potential class action lawsuit against Nintendo with the help of its FARs. The unnamed minor, read under 18 years old, alleges the mobile game Mario Kart Tour has immoral microtransactions that have preyed on minor players. This is a California potential class action lawsuit, although for it to be class action they would have to get more people than just one. I think you have to get somewhere around 3 to 6 people to all sign on to the same lawsuit to turn it into a class action, which really shouldn't be too hard, because I do feel like Mario Kart's World Tours microtransactions probably are unacceptable in most parents' opinion, because Mario Kart World Tour is 100% targeted towards kids. You really can't argue against that, and for any kids game that have microtransactions is a problem. And I would like to see companies, particularly even a really big company like Nintendo, get fined heavily to the point where companies become afraid to make any kind of mobile game targeted towards kids with microtransactions in it. unfortunately, there really is just no market otherwise um, to make a mobile game. You could certainly make a mobile game that has a ton of ads in it, but people won't play it if it has too many ads in it. And the ads that you see, at least on Android, are literally just pushing you to other games that eventually will push you to another game that has microtransactions in it. So even if Mario Kart World Tour didn't have microtransactions in it, it would then probably switch to having ads that would take you to point you to download a different game that would have microtransactions in it. I've also been noticing Facebook has advertised a lot of Android ads to me lately, so I don't know if maybe that's because I changed my ad blocker, or if that's because there's just a shift in Facebook. But I kind of hope that that lawsuit actually does lead to something. Although we will just have to wait and see, and it probably won't matter because Mario Kart World Tour will probably be shut down before this lawsuit even gets to a final stage. And speaking of lawsuits, video game and anime industries in Japan, apparently at some point, and I did not hear about this, had lobbied the Japanese company to make it illegal to upload gameplay footage, let's play footage. So they definitely are going against the idea of let's play being anywhere close to fair use. I don't think there really is any real enforcement around the concepts of fair use or the unwritten concepts of fair dealing in Japan. Now, and the law implies that it's a lot of spoilers, but for somebody to be charged and sued or thrown in jail, which I think they were actually thrown in jail. So this is like the second time we've seen Nintendo, who was definitely involved in this law, throw somebody in jail. Now, I'm going to say something here that's probably going to come off as extremely controversial, but I just don't think it makes sense to allow a company to be involved in how laws are made that end up putting individuals in jail. And part of the reason why it doesn't make sense is that we are slowly sliding down a potential future here where Nintendo as a corporation and other corporations like Nintendo are going to become the equivalent of a mad tyrant, but unlike a mad tyrant king throwing a bunch of its citizens in jail for ridiculous reasons, we can't find a literally equivalent of a guillotine to get rid of Nintendo. And if anything, it feels like Nintendo's previous ties with the Yakuza, if not their continued ties with the Yakuza, I still have a tinfoil hat conspiracy that Nintendo of Japan is fully funded and run secretly by the Yakuza. But they are definitely taking a very bullyish attitude and approach against cheat makers, with the Canadian guy named Bowser, ironically, and now with people uploading footage in Let's Plays. Even if the person who's being persecuted, I'm not even going to say prosecuted, I think this is straight up a Japanese person being persecuted, even if he was putting up just like spoiler clips of the endings of games, like Tears of the Kingdom, if somebody in America on day one put up a spoiler clip of Tears of the Kingdom that should not land somebody in jail, at least. I could see Nintendo making copyright claims, particularly if there was nothing informative or educational or transformative around it to make it fair use. But it shouldn't land people in jail. And you can definitely see why the anime industry would want to try and persecute as many YouTubers and reaction people as possible, in that they see no value in having any kind of critics or reviewers or reactions happen around their anime shows, because they just want it to be they want their audience to be as uninformed as possible, I suppose, so they can sell them garbage as easily as they can sell them good quality content. Imagine potentially having to go into a DVD store, if such a thing still existed, but the laws had been made so that the covers were considered copyrighted, so every single DVD was just a black spine, like black label, maybe with a title on it. Like, that would be an incredibly terrible experience. That's basically what the anime industry wants, though, is that they want you to have to just see the icon on the streaming service or see the label on a DVD and know nothing more than what they say. Movie critics, TV critics shouldn't exist, in their opinion. And I would say that is probably very specifically true for the anime industry in Japan, more than any of the other live action stuff in Japan, of which there really isn't that much. Because in general, TV is so terrible, and in the movies in Japan, the live action movies are so terrible that the audience kind of knows what they're getting anyways. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle has an article here saying that Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was delayed by over a year for polish. The game wasn't released in 2022 because Nintendo wanted to make sure everything was 100% to their standards. This was said in a new interview with the series producer E.G. Onuma. I'm not pronouncing that right. Which, okay. So, if anything, I guess that highlights that Nintendo did the right thing by their major platform game. That being said, it is still worth pointing out that there's still some slight bugginess around Tears of the Kingdom, and I think they put out a patch already, and basically yet another patch, or a day one patch. I think this may be the second patch for Tears of the Kingdom. Which inherently that is a problem too, is that the Switch 2 is going to have to just be a almost always online device, because games are just always going to be released as buggy and going to need patches. So this is the last console where you can realistically have a system where you plug in a cartridge and it just works perfectly fine. And Nintendo would be in a good position, really, to have a checkbox that says, we need the internet for updates, but you can check this box to block online services such as chat or the eShop store. And that they could make that compromise, certainly. Or they could say, we're always going to be online, but put in a password here for the online services and the eShop and parental controls. Very noticeably, that is lackluster on your first experience with the Switch. Is that there really isn't a you need to hand this to your parents to set this up system. The problem, I would say, mostly with the idea of them promoting and saying we took our time to polish this game and took an extra year, it led them to getting lucky as far as the release of the timing. But Nintendo's not going to do this for all their games, and their second party and third party publishers and developers aren't going to do this for all their games. Nintendo could try to push more people in that direction, and that's slightly helpful, but you still have the vast majority of indie and second party developers who have to get the game out as fast as possible because the publishers demand it or because they need money to just continue working on the next project. And only Zelda, really, only Nintendo would be given the opportunity to wait for a year. Okay. We've stopped winning, so doesn't seem like I had a network issue as much as I would hoped. Just gonna try and cancel everything and activate everything as much as possible. Take too long. Go ahead and summon this. Activate this. Discard this. Do we have enough cards now to summon everything? Not yet. So we now activate this. This guy obviously has a card he can activate. So I guess what I'll do is summon this one first and activate his ability to destroy a face-up card. At this point, I should be able to summon this now. We can go ahead and banish this card, which is probably a better way to do things. Go ahead and set that. Go ahead and summon the last one here. That sets us up for a 2-turn victory, but it does eliminate most of our other options. So if they figure out a way to clear the board, I'll be in trouble. We also have a GameDeveloper.com article. The God of War Ragnarok art director, Raf Grossetti, has exited Sony Santa Monica. He was the art director for the God of War revamped games, which, yeah, not 100% sure they've made any indication that they were going to make any more God of War games in that style. So I question if that Sony Santa Monica in general was very tired after making 2 God of War games, which I don't know why you would be tired after just making 2. Like, seems almost like a laziness, and that's the wrong phrase to use, almost certainly. But they had a good thing going there as one of the best, most successful and well-received games. You would think Sony would want them to continue down that path, but at least the art director doesn't want to go that way. And I don't think I can, having not played any of the God of War games, I don't think I can really complain too much about the art direction, other than to say that this clearly was a group of people who were inspired by that Vikings TV show when it was popular and Viking art. So you've done a applaudable job to take a Spartan who is covered in the ashes of his family and turn him into a more Nordic looking bearded old man, and done more with his like general appearance. If anything, perhaps this was, and this is just pure speculation on my part, perhaps this was a idea that Sony Santa Monica wanted to focus more on this boy character and turn him into the new God of War character, or have spin-off games and stop making God of War and Kratos as a character, which at a certain level I feel like that kind of makes some sense, that you would potentially want to get away from Kratos as a character. I mean, they have, for the better, completely rewritten Kratos in the minds of people. He is no longer just this edgelord character in an edgelord story that is doing a whole bunch of like sex mini games in the original more beat 'em up platform puzzling games. Of course, God of War also kind of drastically changed as far as the type of game it became more of an open world forest RPG game from the looks of it. But I would say it's probably better to drastically change what God of War was in the reboot than it would be to just let the title and the idea die completely. Mario, I guess, is a great example of that, in that if Nintendo had felt the need that all Mario games would have been side-scrolling platforming, like Mario Bros. 1, 2, 3, Super Mario World, then they would have never made Mario 64, and then that means they would have never made Odyssey, or Galaxy, or even Sunshine. Yeah. The exact quote here says, "Today is my last day at Sony after a decade of being on a part of this incredible journey. It's bittersweet, but above all, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for the countless opportunities I've been fortunate to have." Then there's a full conversation here. I guess you'd have to click on. He added on Twitter that soon he'd be showing more news of his next step, and that it had been some time in coming. Let's see. He also was a character artist on Order 1886 and Mass Effect 3. It's not kind, but I think accurate to point out that the art director is only going to have so much influence on a game, particularly since you've already established what the art direction looks like for future God of War games. They don't have to get too crazy or different with it, or they can go crazy and different with it, and people would potentially be okay with a change. Like, very few people, I think, would stick to a game or not play a sequel just because the art direction changed, unless it was very, very drastically. Bayonetta is probably a great example of that, because Bayonetta, its art direction is pretty much established in the first game, and you're not going to go too far away from that in any of the Bayonetta sequels. And then when you do go very far away with the Bayonetta spin-off game with the Bayonetta Ceres little girl, that's still somewhat in the same art style, but it felt fairly different, and I wasn't really willing to go that way. Had Bayonetta 2, for instance, drastically looked different, if it was like less anime-esque and cartoony and was more hyper-realistic in 3D, I think I'd have a problem with that. GoldenEye 64 remakes kind of need to look like GoldenEye 64 in the low polygon cartoony style. If it was hyper-realistic graphics, I think people might feel like it doesn't quite fit. Although if you were to reboot GoldenEye 64, it almost certainly would have hyper-realistic graphics. Pac-Man. Like, Lego just announced a Pac-Man set. It's really expensive. It looks like it's got some interesting gimmicks with it, but man, it just looks really, really expensive. But yeah, there's definitely just a art style to Pac-Man too, and if you tried to make Pac-Man hyper-realistic ghost or hyper-realistic Pac-Man character, whatever that would even look like, that would probably be too far. I feel like I'm rambling here, so let's move to the next story. Apparently Bandcamp has unionized at Epic Games. Before the weekend started, Bandcamp employees had a majority vote to become the first union inside the parent company of Epic Games. It's worth mentioning, Epic also tweeted out that there was a big coupon available, probably to undercut this announcement. I'm confused as to at what point Bandcamp was owned by Epic. And see, the majority votes to form a union seems to be just one of the first steps of a constant fight to establish yourself as a union and get legal protections from like the National Labor Review Board and demand those protections when they're being violated nonstop. So saying like we won is weird. Let's see. Diamond also seems to be involved somewhere here. Maybe I'm thinking of a different Bandcamp, though. Because Bandcamp, I feel like that was some kind of audio editing software. Let's see. Let me see if I can do some brief research here. Figure out what Bandcamp is. I know it's not just a like one time at Bandcamp joke. from American Pie. Yep. Yeah. According to Wikipedia, Bandcamp is an American online audio distribution platform, not an editor. It was founded in 2007 by Odd Post co-founder Ethan Diamond. So Diamond's not a company, it's the guy's name. And programmers Sean Grunberg. It was acquired in 2022 by Epic Games. And I guess I vaguely recall that happening, but I definitely didn't pay much attention to that announcement. So the business model is artists and labels upload music to Bandcamp and control how they sell it, setting their own prices, offering users the option to pay more. So Epic Games acquired it, I assume, to then be able to have like an Epic Games store that offered music to. And obviously, being musicians and artists, they were slightly easier to unionize than programmers, who I think there are just a lot of anti-union programmers out there. In part because I imagine a lot of programmers are thinking it, at the very least, if it's not true, that they are getting overpaid for what they're doing. And if there were standardized pay schedules, or based on like seniority and how many years you've been in a company, a lot of video game programmers probably feel like they'd get a pay cut instead of a pay reduce. Pay is the number one thing that's used against the worker to basically trick them into being anti-union, because it is very easy as management to offer what seems like a very high amount of pay with no benefits, because nobody can calculate the benefits correctly. All the cost of benefits for like health insurance and sick time and leave, and just for being forced to pay extra for overtime. Many unions, like time and a half is usually standard or required as far as overtime in the United States, but many unions, if you're like working 5-10 extra hours of overtime, you often are getting like double time pay, not just time and a half or even more, or you're getting limitations on the amount of overtime, because a lot of times overtime just becomes a way to wear down people, or let themselves wear themselves down, and then they become sicker and less physically and mentally healthy, which then, if you don't have health insurance to adjust for that, that's a continued problem. Anyways, that has nothing to do really with Bandcamp. Bandcamp seems to offer several lossless formats. They apparently were doing a charity during the COVID-19 pandemic. It doesn't seem like there's any real other history here. When they were acquired on March 2nd, 2020, Epic said the platform will play an important role in Epic's vision to build out their creator marketplace ecosystem. Ethan Diamond said Bandcamp will keep operating as a standalone marketplace in music community. course, all of that may change now that they've voted to unionize. And then, for other big news, I suppose anything Star Wars has a chance of being big news. So, Ubisoft's Star Wars game is reportedly planned for a release in March of 2024. Doesn't seem like we have a huge amount of information about what the Star Wars game is, though, since they can only show me this one screenshot, and then they've got a video talking about a completely different Ubisoft game. It really is ridiculous that Video Games Chronicle does that. And then, without getting into an anti-Slacktivist, anti-SJW rant, we have a GameDeveloper.com article here, ways to inclusively design fat characters in games. And then I'm just going to look at these characters and go, there is a fairly large problem as far as inclusivity amongst fat characters when every single character you are depicting is at the very, very heavy, obese, morbidly obese, cartoonishly obese scale. And noticeably, the most famous fat character who has been in video games since early 80s in Mario is never considered a fat character in these conversations, probably because the push is not that fat characters should exist. The push is that ridiculously fat characters should exist under a extremely small, short set of guidelines being set by SJWs who really have no authority to be setting any guidelines or saying anything at all. It is once again very important to point out that drawing a fat character does zero to help an actual fat person in the real world. They are not hiring fat actors to mocap. They are not hiring fat people to 3D scan. They're not hiring fat voice actors, anything like that. If they really wanted to do something to improve the lot in life of people who are fat, you could take your development of any random video game company outside of California, which, let's just face it, Hollywood, California, LA, those areas are so incredibly fat phobic just in the real world that there's basically nobody fat in the entire state. I know I'm exaggerating for effect there, but so yeah, just move to one of the flyover states in the middle of the United States. You'll have plenty of fat employees that you could then hire to work as jobs. If anything, you look at your average game developer, and there's incredibly few overweight programmers in the video game industry compared to the amount of overweight programmers that should be in the game industry. Like chugging soda, playing video games all day, eating garbage food out of like vending machines. All of that should lead to very large people. And only you can only really point at like Redmond, Washington and Gabe Newell himself for being one like really morbidly obese person in the game industry that you can point to. Like I don't think I can name a single other famous person or programmer or anybody that's actually that fat. Maybe Tyler McVickerson or Edmund McMillan. Both of them are a little chubby. But that's about it as far as employees, when really it should be closer to 50% at least are really, really fat people. And most of that comes down to the boys club and the shallowness of people who run video game companies. There are undoubtedly better game programmers out there that are not getting work and not getting the opportunity to be better at their craft of programming video games just because they don't fit the physical appearance discrimination that's happening. But then when you get back to game characters, like here's a joke character that's obviously a joke character. Here's a lady that's plump certainly, but fairly average, so I don't mind this depiction. I assume there's still a little bit of a joke in there being Nordic. Here's an obvious joke character. Here's a probably a little bit fatter character than this, particularly when you look in the face. Here you have a fairly plump character. It feels to me like this character, and this character are all from the same game, though. The cat doesn't look fat, so we're not including that. Here is a really, really fat Sims character, and here's a really, really fat Sea of Thieves character. So it looks like 3 of these are from Sea of Thieves, and 3 of these are from the same game, if maybe not this one. And then one's from The Sims. So even just looking at the screenshot, it's either a case that they spent not that much time to find fat characters and put them all together, or they have a very narrow collection of acceptable depictions of fat characters. It really just does come down to why would you depict a character as being fat in general. Here you have a way too fat character. Part of the problem too is when you buy these 3D pre-made models, they are being made by a lot of times Asian people or people with an Asian eye, and there are just no fat people in Japan or China at all. Like, the percentage is incredibly low, except for sumo wrestling in Japan. And for that reason, they don't make 3D models of fat characters to begin with, and then you end up with a situation like this, where they have just stretched out in the width side. On the x-axis, they've just stretched out a normal body type to try to make it fatter, when that is not a realistic way in which anybody would be this fat. Your face would not be this skinny, and your head would not be this small when you have that broad of shoulders, or that broad of a chest, or that thick of arms, or that big of a gut, or that big of thighs. So, anthropomorphically incorrect. And there is obviously, particularly in anime, a heavy push to go for more of the moe art style that's anthropomorphically incorrect in smaller and less animation, making the characters look small and childlike, not big and obese. It's worth pointing out that when you do have a fat character, like Mario, it's just very normalized. Like, nobody even thinks of it. Like, I have never heard in my life, and it's never crossed my mind, really, that Mario is fat. Like, it just never even occurred to me. In the same way that I probably see fat people in the real world all the time, and it just doesn't occur to me, because I don't think I really have any large amount of fat people hate type mentality built into me, although it does seem like on the internet there is a lot of people like that. I think the internet amplifies the voices of a few there. But then when you do see them in video games, clearly somebody made a decision. Alloy from Horizon series was made fat, and the complaint there, I think, is often misconstrued as people hating on her because her face was made fat because they scanned in a different face actor. I think the scanning technology is probably just messed up there, and they just need to make some kind of adjustments. In the same way that most Hollywood actors are also a lot older looking, and they put a ton of makeup and digital makeup on them, particularly these days. But the real complaint, from my perspective, as far as Alloy in Horizon Zero Dawn having a fatter face, is that she didn't have that face in the first game. So they had already established her with a really good looking face model for the first game, and that's just how you establish a character, so you should stick with that. Or you've got to tell a storyline reason. What's interesting is that in some of the games like Fable back in the day, there were fatness scales. It didn't really lead to anything, but if you ate too much food, your custom character would get fatter. But you see that that's not a gimmick or an idea that other people copied from Peter Molyneux, because it was just a crazy, silly idea from Peter Molyneux, in the same way that the Fable games also have STDs, and so you play in this role-playing game and you can get an STD, which, again, not something that anybody copied because it doesn't add anything to the game. I probably should stop playing at this point, but I'm winning and it wouldn't hurt to stick. Then you get into a Sims example here, and this is just unfair to say this is appropriate fat representation unless you're talking about this lady back here being the person who is being represented as being fat, because someone who's pregnant should not really be considered being fat, and I assume this lady is also pregnant. These other characters, though, are your very standard video game characters where people are pretty skinny. This lady in particular. This looks like a little girl, but she could just be an adult sitting down. Now, if you wanted to make an argument that there should be more pregnant people walking around in video games, fine. There's, of course, the major danger that if you introduce a character being pregnant, that you either have to deliver a baby in that video game, which is an odd direction to go in a video game, or you have to kill the person for tragedy, and neither one of those are particularly the stories I think most male management in video games want to tell. And in all fairness, it's not like you see a lot of pregnant people that are just outwardly showing that are in their 8th or 9th months in your day-to-day life. You probably do walk around more people who are pregnant than you think before they start showing. But then pregnant ladies tend to stop wandering around in public once they're in the 8th or 9th month. I really need to do something about this deck. It is just too much clicking. Yeah, this will be our last game. I just don't have enough energy to um, to go any further with this. Maybe I should call this first section the pre-show scramble, as a parody on a pre-show rambling. That would be cute, certainly, if I could get an art piece of art to work with it. See if we have any other pictures. Now, noticeably, here's one of the longest opinion pieces we've seen on GameDeveloper.com. So, really highlights that whoever wrote this opinion piece had something to say, and they have basically nothing to say when they're talking about news. This is Bryant Francis, senior editor, which I guess if we click on him, yeah, he's kind of a fat guy himself, which I think it's worth pointing that out. And he definitely does look like a California style SJW type person, if I was to guess, with that haircut and the goatee and mustache. It's frankly just not something that I think should be focused on that much either, if we're just going to be honest here. Depicting fat characters undercuts a much more important character goal as far as character design, in the sense that you need iconic, good-looking characters. I assume God of War, like, you might call him kind of fat too in the remake, and so it has been done. But first and foremost, you need characters that people want to look at for a very long amount of time, 60 to 200 hours, and you want a character that people can fall in love with, not particularly relate to, just fall in love with enough that they would want to they would want to play a sequel to that game if you would ever make a sequel to it. And since the depiction of fictional characters in video games is an art form as much as anything else, you do also have to admit that art in general does not depict fat people. It just doesn't. Whatever the traditional concept of beauty at the time is what most art depicts. So in the Renaissance era, in which fat people were looked as being more beautiful, you did see more depictions of chubby ladies in Renaissance era. But in modern times, when you look at photography and fashion and art and paintings, skinny is considered the more beautiful standard. Skinny slash muscular. So it's asking something unfairly to say video games should depict fat people when every single artist, every single fashion show is not really doing that. And then, yes, there are occasionally some like oversized plus size model fashion shows out there, but they're extremely rare. That dad dating simulator game from Game Grumps might be a great example of naturally integrating fatter characters. And in Honey Pop, as a comparison. I think there was some fatter characters. But if the game involves a lot of action, where the character is supposed to jump around and swing swords or fight or things like that, it's no surprise that there wouldn't naturally be a fat person as depicted. Your first go-to thought wouldn't be to depict the character as a fat person. And then our last big bit of news from GameDeveloper.com says Microsoft has confirmed that its Activision Blizzard merger has been approved in China. Which, okay. Like, I assume that's true, and I assume China is not going to change their mind. Well, they certainly could. My macro got stopped by an anti-bot on... This looks like Gamatsu. Interesting. Did it get stopped on Gamatsu? Yeah. Interesting. Alright. Let's just pull the trigger on this and clear the field. It's late in the night to be mowing grass outside, but I can hear it happening. Oh, whoops. I guess I should have activated the ability again. I don't see a way I lose here, 1,500 to 8,000, but it is possible. So I don't have any Video Games Chronicle articles at all today because the macro didn't happen, which is fine. I guess we'll just leave it at that. We'll have possibly an overabundance of news on Monday from Video Games Chronicles. Then so an open world survival crafting game called Omega Crafter has an open alpha test and now available. What looks interesting here, I don't want to waste time looking at the trailer, is that this looks like a very nice soft CGI type art style, and it's very, very far away from, I guess we are going to have to watch the trailer, from Minecraft, which I think that's really what you needed to do. We've seen hundreds if not thousands of attempts at making Minecraft / Roblox / Terraria clones. And if you're going to do something, you probably need to make the art style change. Now, these different colored little, I almost want to call them ninja characters, don't strike me as being particularly interesting, but they do seem to have a like visual scratch programming element to them, so there's a whole programming aspect to it. So this looks intriguing, as it might be more educational as a game, and then you have to program things. It looks a little bit more mature in that you're fighting more realistic monsters, and looks like you can be overwhelmed by monsters more. I guess part of the question certainly would be whether or not there's an overall goal. The interface feels more like a World of Warcraft game than it Feels quite like Minecraft, which is probably the right direction to go. So yeah, looking at Omega Crafter as trailer, there's a lot to potentially be intrigued by, at least. A pixel art visual novel dating sim called From Madness with Love launches July 18th for Steam. Let's see. So we'll put that on the follow list. Let's see if, like most visual novels, really can't do much more than that. The pixel art style doesn't really make a lot of sense to me when it's fully Japanese voice acted, but maybe that opens the door to people who are good at making visual novels but bad at animating, even if they happen to be Japanese, and probably could get some Japanese animator to work for dirt cheap to animate. But yeah, I can't directly hate on an experiment like that. A roguelike action game called Igni Stone launches October 3rd for PC, iOS, and Android. It too is on Steam. So now noticeably, they're saying this is a roguelike game. I thought they said it was a card game, but it isn't, is it? Okay. A 2D puzzle adventure game called In His Time launches October 3rd for PC and then December for Switch. I may very well lose at this level. Yeah, I've lost. This guy got charged up enough and I didn't have enough counter abilities, so very possibly I made one mistake, and that one mistake cost me victory. Well, maybe not. He didn't attack. Maybe he had already attacked once. Okay. So we're gonna summon this normally. And that means this ability countered that ability. Now he's trying to activate something else. Activate one of these but skip your next battle phase. So he's just getting more and more powered up. What is stopping this from working? I think the guy is just teasing me at this point. And I just don't know what action I could possibly even play to defeat this. Just reading all of these instructions here to see what happened as to why this ability happened like that, why his attack went down to 0 and why he couldn't activate his action. Oh yeah, and that, I suppose this goes to show how little of importance Detective Pikachu is, in that as I was testing my internet over the weekend, I watched Detective Pikachu, and haven't mentioned it here in an hour and 35 minutes. I mean, it's a fine potential like experiment for the way live action Pokemon movies could have gone, but I'm glad they didn't go that direction. The 3D visuals of those Pokemon look weird and awkward, particularly near the end when they start to show you the cartoony to the flat depictions of the Pokemon. And so I just don't think it really worked. I'd have to do a lot more research than I'm willing to do to figure out if the Detective Pikachu game, which I don't know even if that even came to the West, was particularly close to the story of the Detective Pikachu movie. But I would say I just in general did not enjoy the main character either in Ryan Reynolds playing and voicing a talking Detective Pikachu, or in the Sun character, who really didn't do much either. In a lot of ways, it feels like Detective Pikachu was just straight up trying to evoke a lot of nostalgia for like the very first Pokemon movie, bringing back Mewtwo, which even at that point Mewtwo is probably not the character that you should have invoked. There are other god Pokemon type characters that would have been more modern and made more sense. This is our last opportunity. If this doesn't work, we've lost. There is, I suppose, a question as far as kids' Pokemon movies, or Pokemon movies and going forward as to what those are going to be. I would assume that there's going to be a Ash Ketchum movie of some sort, one last one, after they've wrapped up the Ash Ketchum like after they've wrapped up the Ash Ketchum cartoon, it would definitely make a lot of sense to have an Ash Ketchum Pokemon movie, one last one, but then they're probably going to go with 2D, highly animated yeah, it still isn't letting me activate this ability. Oh, maybe I can use this ability. Will this final blow actually turn into a final blow? Have we gotten it done now? Well, it seems like we made major progress there, but it may not matter. Let's see, Komatsu has a game called Hit in His Time, launching October 3rd for PC and then in December for Switch. Let's check this out. Looks like a creepy 2D platformer game. Let's see, a game called Bokura launches August 10th for the Switch, PC, iOS, and Android. We may start to see more of that happen, where we start to see things for the Switch and PC and iOS and Android. And PC, particularly if the Steam Deck became more popular, may be this weird, both having a foot in both categories of being more low-powered portable gaming and high-powered AAA gaming that's even better than console gaming in some instances, although perhaps not as many instances as it should be. Here we can see Bokura is already on the following list. Which, yeah, I don't really think there's much of a reason not to just make as many YouTube shorts as possible. Unfortunately, it is probably going to be a very slow response if YouTube shorts stop being helpful as far as getting new subscribers and views. It'll probably take me a long time to realize that and figure out some way to make less YouTube shorts overall. And yes, if I had a whole team working on them, I'd probably move some YouTube shorts around so that things that aren't available for pre-order or purchase yet get delayed. I should probably just surrender at this point. Because he's just activating a massive amount of cards. Let's see, a PC game called Stories from Seoul, the Gundog demo is now available. This looks like a early 90s anime. Too much green though. Even though most of the characters have different outfits, it all being in green tones seems a little weird. So, yeah. You can see the entire game looks like it's in green, which maybe means this is inspired by an old game or it is an old game. Either one is fairly believable. Although it would have to be like a DS game or something where you'd have one screen and then you'd have a secondary interface on the second screen. Definitely am getting to the point where I'm not paying enough attention to Yu-Gi-Oh! And this usually happens when I play off screen for a while as I get distracted and then I'll look up and I've run out of time. A game called Moth Qubit demo is now available for PC. It's a Kafka-esque satirical pixel RPG game due out in 2024. I find people who use the phrase Kafka-esque probably don't know what Kafka-esque means, including myself. So I tried to stay away from it. I think at a certain point everybody would have to know what Kafka is for something like Kafka-esque to make sense. I don't know why this guy did not attack, but I'm going to see if I can win here. Otherwise, I'm going to surrender. which shouldn't just surrender, but we've played long enough that it should still count. I really can't activate this card because then I would have to discard this card. If I can attach anything in here to get this over 1500 or to exactly 1500, I could win. So it's going to come down to this here. Is there an ability I can activate here? Looks like I can activate it. Discard that card. Attach that card. I can't activate this. So I think this is going to get rid of the card I'm trying to attach. Okay. Let's just surrender. But by surrendering, it doesn't look like I got any score or any experience at all. But frankly, it was just taking too long at that point. So, in doing all of that, we accomplished 11 goals. We've normal summoned everything. We've won enough duels. We need to duel more, quite a bit more, and activate spell and trap cards and just duel more. It's interesting. It's an overlapping challenge here. Duel 50 times here, duel 20 times here. As far as the daily quest, we have everything but solo mode. And apparently I don't have a duel live for some reason, which I really should. Almost feels like the duel live and logins only reset when you get back, exit out of the app, and then enter the app again. Alright, let's turn on the blur and let's burn through the news as fast as possible. A game called Nightmare Escape is coming to the Switch this summer. It's currently available for the PS5, PS4, and PC. Again, let's take a look on Steam. Give it a chance. Although, this came out in November of 2022 and has only 29 reviews. We are, it seems like, increasingly scraping the bottom of the barrel as far as re-releasing Steam games that barely sold at all on Steam on consoles, since there's just seemingly not that much competition at the moment on consoles. Soul Wars for the PS4, PS5, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Switch, and PC launches June 27th. A PC demo is available. Soul deck building RPG. I could see not being particularly interested in this, just based on the visual style. Passepartout, The Lost Artist, is coming to the Switch on October 19th. I just love how Gematsu has a article for everything. Here we can see Passepartout 2, The Lost Artist, is very positive, so that does allow me to just go ahead and put this on the wish list and take it off the follow list. Now, should I make another YouTube short around the game just because it's coming to the Switch? Probably not, but I'll do it anyways. I mean, I'm basically saying I'm going to make a YouTube short around any game if it has any new release on any new console or any new update or any new demo added to it. Just because I haven't defined any rules to say no that I would consistently be able to follow. Let's see, the Wizardry, the 5 Ordeals DLC scenario, the absence of Misericordia launches June 22nd. Which, yeah. The one thing I have determined is DLC should have its own YouTube short and not just highlight the main game. A game called Escape the Restaurant adventure game. Well, an Escape the Restaurant type game, adventure game called Enjoy the Dinner has been announced for Switch and PC. And yeah, this looks weird to say the least. This is the type of screenshots that aren't good enough for a YouTube short though, so I'm gonna have to say no to that, which is perhaps a little unfair, but it's their own fault for having weird visuals and not that interesting of screenshots. A horror adventure game remake, Chloe's Requiem Encore, has been announced for PC. This looks creepy, to say the least. I assume that this is a horror RPG maker, but obviously some of these actually do sell. Otherwise they wouldn't continue to make them. A WSS Playground and Berkey Clock announce, I guess those are two companies, Bukiri Clock announced an episodic sci-fi horror adventure game called Boyhood's End, which, okay, looks like a space train. There was a surprisingly large amount of space train movies and maybe even a TV show all around the Galaxy 999 series. And that would have been in the 80s, if not earlier. So again, I have to question, should I make a YouTube short around this? I'll give it a chance. Craftopia early access seamless world update launches in June. Let's see. Which that sounds like yet another Minecraft clone. And apparently this is a long-awaited major update. I don't know if Craftopia is on Steam. I guess it is. Now definitely would be the time to potentially make a Minecraft competitor, considering Microsoft has sullied the name of Minecraft with 2 to 3 bad Minecraft spin-off games. That being said, this Craftopia game doesn't quite feel visually consistent in its art style. It seems like there's a lot of silliness in a lot of gameplay screenshots here, and then there's some seriousness that seems to conflict with that. And if this game has been out since 2020 and now it's finally getting a seamless world update, which I assume just means that the world procedurally generates instead of not procedurally generating and being more bespoke level design, that's a long time to wait for that feature, considering in particular that Minecraft launched with the procedural generation concept built in. A company called Odin Count announces a adventure game called Dream Channel Zero for PC. There was a Channel Zero horror series that was like on FX or Sci-Fi many years ago. Really doesn't seem like there's much here that would make me even put this on the follow list, though. I'll give it a chance out of generosity, but should I make a YouTube short on it? I don't know. I don't know if I should be curating any of it. It's just going to waste my time to even think about curating shorts. I should probably just say yes to everything. The game Glaciered launches in 2025. It's going to be published by Playism. I think this is the one where you're like frozen under the ocean, but also you're this bird-like creature, alien creature under the water. So you're flying in the water for some reason. Yeah. I'm not sure I quite understand the concept of Glaciered yet, and I'm not sure I'll like the concept once they do explain it. It looked like the visuals would be fairly boring. You'd just be in the ocean, a lot of blue, a lot of rocks, a lot of fish. Feels like you would need a lot of caves and other things to interact with. Pocket Pair announces a side-scrolling Metroidvania game called Nevergrave, The Witch and the Curse for consoles and PC. We are getting very consistent listings here, where as soon as something gets announced, it has a Steam page, which I have to applaud that. That helps me quite a bit. Alan Wake 2 launches in October, according to a voice actor. That's supposed to come out in October, says the voice actor. We definitely have had in the past cases where voice actors have leaked things and it been inaccurate. Alan Wake 2 is going to be an Epic Games Store exclusive, which I guess just highlights that at least the Alan Wake developers and the makers of Control still are very much in the favor of the Epic Games Store. Remedy Entertainment in general is in bed with Epic Games, and their relationship still seems strong, unless of course this was contractually obliged years earlier, which we wouldn't know. Let's see, this week's Japanese game releases include Akai Ito, Ao Shiriri HD Remaster, Batsugun, Saturn Tribute Boosted, and more. So a decent collection of very Japanese sounding games, on top of some non-Japanese sounding games like Farming Simulator 23 for the Switch. Yep, seems like a decent collection of games there. So a good week for Japanese game releases. Tetris The Absolute The Grandmaster 2 Plus is coming to PS4 and Switch via Arcade Archives on June 1st. This was apparently a game originally launched in December of 2000, so they're re-releasing a very old game. And you can see that just in even the screenshot and how blurry and pixely that screenshot is. Everdream Valley launches May 30th for the PS4, PS5, and PC, and then in June for Switch. Yet another either Stardew Valley farming ranching simulator, or yeah, I think that's what it is. Kind of cutesy versions of the animals and cutesy kid-like characters that you can custom decorate. Farming adventure with a dash of magic. It might be something worth checking out there. I'm not 100% against the idea of playing a farming ranching simulator if they can find a way to make it fun and also not just get off topic and have me run through dungeons or something else. on top of farming, because as soon as you give me something more interesting to do versus farming, which is inherently going to be very boring, I'm going to want to stop doing the farming. And perhaps if you gave me a pure farming simulator, I'd want to stop doing the farming fairly quickly. Anyways, I would think a farming game probably should be about 5 hours long compared to a 60-hour game. Something short and sweet. Apparently, Komatsu has Final Fantasy 16 final hands-on gameplay that they're talking about here, and this looks like there's a massive amount of videos to show. And I'm noticing that in these screenshots, there's just a ton of characters that they're introducing or that I am unaware of, but they may not be that important of characters. Overall, though, it seems like you're just in a forest fighting monsters for most of the game. And yeah, the medieval fantasy element of it. That potentially highlights a situation where the entirety of Final Fantasy 16 is going to feel rushed, in that you're just going to run around a forest fighting monsters, and you're never going to enter any kind of like castle or dungeon, and that very possibly it's just going to be one major city that you go to in the middle of the map, and it's going to feel a lot like a Monster Hunter game compared to where Final Fantasy should probably have more variety in the locations. It could also be just a case that all this gameplay footage is only showing a field, so it doesn't spoil anything. Although I'd be fairly surprised if there was some big twist, like Final Fantasy 16 is set in the same universe as Final Fantasy 15 or 7 or 13 or something like that. Let's see. AEW Fight Forever launches June 29th, which for wrestling fans, I think they will probably be a little excited around that. Pixel Ripped 1978 launches June 15th. It's a virtual reality adventure game. It's available on Steam VR. Is it something I would bother to make a YouTube short around? Yeah. Honestly, there's so few Steam VR games anyways, might as well. Etrian Odyssey Origins Collection has a how-to trailer. If you want to check that out. Weird West Definitive Edition is coming to the Switch. Let's see. Noticeably, it doesn't seem like it. Yeah, Definitive Edition is already on Steam. And I guess if a game is already on Steam and it's going to the Switch, it gives me an excuse to come look at the game and say, alright, this is mostly positive and it has way more than 30 reviews, so I can put it on the wish list. But it doesn't really justify me making a YouTube short around it. If there's nothing new on Steam in particular, I shouldn't make a YouTube short around it. That's one rule I think I can follow, or try to follow. Fit in the Tight Spaces is an old game. It's a card-based fighting game where you play a card to do a specific action. It's very positive. Is it out of early access? Yes, it is. So we can put that on the wish list. So we just very seamlessly have moved into the fall list cleanup now. Fist Knight, a game where you're punching things, is very positive, so I'll put that on the wish list. Although, in all fairness, a Doom style game where you're punching things is probably not for me. FIFA 2022 is very positive, but it's no longer available on the Steam store, so they've just taken it off. So we can remove that from the fall list. Yeah, and that's probably a problem with any kind of like sports game in general, is that I should probably just say no to it. side-scrolling shooter game with a interesting bodysuit character with no reviews from February. We'll give it more time. An early access game that's very positive, but I guess we would need to give it more time too. Is this even in English? It's only in English. What is this? Fuck-ton simulator. It's a Cthulhu roguelite deck game. Well, it's very positive too, so put that on the follow list. FGTV Goozy. I think I want to say no to this one. Yeah, I don't even know what FGTEV stands for. So I'm so out of the loop. If this is some kind of TV show or what. It looks like it's a Ghostbuster game. And it does have over 30 reviews. But I'm going to say no, because I just have no connection to this at all. And there's enough official Ghostbusters games to say no to it. Feudalia is some kind of deck building game with no reviews, so we'll say no to that. Inherently, the problem always comes down to, though, that there's people who play card games in the real world tend not to play PC versions of the card games, so they never get reviewed. I think I do also own desktop gaming simulator, whatever its real name is. You should just play with that. Here we have a Christmas calendar, find the object thing. I think we can say no to that. I don't know particularly why I would have even put that on the follow list in the first place. Like, Christmas type of games are just going to be a no, no matter what. And then third is in early access since November of 2022 and just doesn't have any reviews as a VR game. So, still looking for a good archery type game. This looks like it's an on rails archery, in the sense that you're in a boat that's moving and you're shooting at things. Actually, I'm going to put it on the follow list again. Fear of the Dark obviously is mixed, so we can say no to that. And then that gets us to the GameDeveloper.com, since we skipped all the Video Games Chronicle articles, or didn't launch any of those. I might launch them, and we may just talk about them after we go through all the new games, but probably not. We talked about in the last stream that Dead by Daylight is getting spin-offs, 2 spin-offs. One is a different type of multiplayer game, and one is more of a single-player game. I wouldn't be surprised if the single-player game doesn't ever get finished, or the other multiplayer game doesn't get finished. Dead by Daylight potentially could be a slowly improved series. But I talked about this. Let's see. My Games has opened a creative hub in Abu Dhabi to drive MENA expansion. What is MENA? Middle East something, I bet. Growing MENA market. Yep. And that's when you know you've gotten too inside baseball, when you're just using a initialism like MENA and not explaining it or linking to it in any way. And yeah, certainly I think anybody who's paid attention can give a lot of examples and reasons why making games in the Middle East is going to be fraught with new challenges and problems as far as just freedom of speech and freedom of um, just the general laws and the way that you can live your life while working in Abu Dhabi or in the Middle East would be. They tend, Middle East countries, if you squish them all together and make an amalgamation, they all tend to be particularly constrictive as far as what creatives can do and how creatives can live their lives. So that really doesn't foster a lot of creativity. Apparently, the Life is Strange developer Tech9 Games has been hit with staff layoffs. Their round of layoffs come months ahead of its upcoming release, The Expanse of Telltale series. Which maybe means that they are done with developing The Expanse of Telltale series already, which is very possible, and that's why the layoffs happened. Although, in all fairness, Life is Strange developers in particular probably should have some layoffs, because if you look at the diminished quality of Life is Strange, even in its later episodes of Season 1, and then the spin-off Before the Storm game not really selling well, then making Life is Strange a completely different story set with completely different characters and that being a huge flop, and then making Life is Strange True Colors, yet another completely different game with a completely different character, and that not really selling. You've had at least 4 bites at this apple as far as the Life is Strange series, and none of them have particularly worked. Even here, you're showing not Chloe, some other character. This is the character, I believe, from True Colors, as being the iconic character from the Life is Strange series, when I think her name is Chloe from the first game should have been the iconic character, and she should have been around the whole time. It would have frankly been more interesting if the main character from the first game had time rewind mechanic abilities in the first game and then lost them as a way of solving that story, and then ended up gaining some other ability in the second game, and it just becomes the running gag that this one character in every game series and in every game series gets a different ability. But yeah, as far as having successful games, developers of Life is Strange not particularly doing a great job there. I'm not even 100% sure that Tech9 Games really worked on the first Life is Strange games. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Maybe they made Life is Strange 1 under a different name. If Tech9 only made True Colors and The Expanse, and we haven't seen The Expanse yet, then that's also still not very surprising that there would be layoffs. There's layoffs happening everywhere. We already talked about Bandcamp unionizing. Microsoft is ended 2022, or they did end 2022, that would have been a long time ago, by deleting 7.51 million inauthentic Xbox accounts. The back half of 22 saw Microsoft step up its account enforcement game. I heard that Google potentially is going to start clawing back some of the inactive Gmail accounts too, which, yeah, that might be interesting, but it also might lead to real problems too. Like, I know somebody stole an email from me a long time ago and pretty much never going to get it back. And that email was the email I used to make a Microsoft account for my Xbox 360, so I can't log into that Xbox account. Which it's very possible that that account was one of the accounts that got deleted. Although the phrase inauthentic here doesn't really make a lot of sense as far as what they mean by inauthentic. Inauthentic translates to bot accounts that send players spam messages, cheat, or ultimately create an unlevel playing field for our players and detract from their experience. So it's not like they're just shutting down old accounts, they're going after bot accounts, which makes more sense. We talked about Nintendo being sued. I'd like to see this lawsuit go forward. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets knocked out. And see, at this point, this is where if I made a custom web page, I would say like immature warning, frank discussions of potentially adult nature as we look at the new games. And if I just make it a web page, a web tab that opens, it would always play at the right time, and I could make multiple pages like that. So I just have to get down to the idea of making a web page, which even that is somewhat complicated now with HTML5 and CSS. Like, if I was to try to make a web page, I would definitely be using HTML1 or 2, maybe HTML3 to make a web page. Very old style stuff that is just not the way things are done now. We have this Era Exordium, which looks like it might be something of interest. We have Rocket Assault Black City, which doesn't look like anything of interest. For Race, it's nothing. Executioners, fighting game with giant axes. It's an interesting gimmick, at least. Let's see, Flow City. Give it a chance. Fishbone. Give it a chance. Dungeon Knight. Just looks like a frustration platformer, although in fairness I should make YouTube shorts around frustration platformers. This looks like a mobile phone port that was poorly done. And then we have our first adult game called Milfvania Episode 1. It's 3D CGI models of a kind of poor nature, I would say. The animation doesn't look great. All of the female characters look particularly tall and somewhat bigger than the men slash young men in the game. There's definitely one character here that has been shrunk down in scale to make him look like he's almost an underage kid in an adult game. There's also weirdly a character here that's wearing a headscarf this whole time, which just does not make a lot of sense in an adult game. But whatever. There's also a scene where it's like they're filming in a couple of the screenshots, filming in a bathroom. But yeah, it definitely looks like just yet another one of these visual novels for $7.99 for chapter 1. And then they say in June 20th, chapter 2 will come out, so they kind of know that the whole game is probably already made. Let's see. Next we have Nine-Tailed Okitsune Tail. Give that a chance. Move the tabs forward. Humanoid Huntress. This isn't. Almost thought this was an adult game, but I guess it's just an ugly top-down twin-stick shooter. HRO, Human Resources Officer. Choose your own adventure story with more visuals than you usually would expect. No, choose your own adventure story. They're saying it's a puzzle-driven visual novel as a descriptor. I just don't think there's quite enough visual polish here, though. You might have done better just releasing a story. instead of having this art style. I just don't imagine this art style would ever really work. And then Dark Days Devil Hunt. Yeah, we'll give it a chance. It's probably nothing. Explore Golden Empire. Looks like it might be a mobile game or a character collector game. It's $9.99. It's single player. It doesn't have any microtransactions. So a creature collector game. Really, I guess at this point, there was supposed to be several Pokemon game clones out there, but they're seemingly not out yet. And I don't know how many creature collectors you really would want. This looks like some kind of weird math game that I wouldn't have any interest in. And isn't something I would make a YouTube short around, because it's not visually appealing. It is perhaps very unfair to say I'd only make YouTube shorts around things that are visually appealing, but that's exactly the case. This is an interesting idea as far as you play as a paranormal hunter, a ghost hunter, in VR or non-VR, online with other people. But you're doing the whole ghost hunting thing in a virtual environment, so you know the ghosts aren't real. And if it's anything like a real ghost hunting experience, then nothing's going to happen in reality. But the thing that really kills this is just the visuals. Don't look good. Forest Simulator. Doesn't look good enough. Unreal World. Doesn't look good enough. Sinkhole. Is this all coming from the same developer publisher? Possibly. Either that or we just have a bundle of really garbage looking games, which, if our suspicions are correct, that adult games are getting bundled and released all back to back, I wouldn't be surprised if garbage looking games also are getting put into piles and approved in a bundle. Puffer Pop, some kind of puzzle game, but doesn't look good enough. I think I'm going to be somewhat cruel today because I'm out of energy. Yeah. Seeing a lot of garbage. Although there really is just no maximum as far as the amount of garbage too. Wait a minute. I didn't want to close that, did I? Yeah, there's kind of just no maximum to the amount of garbage that could be published on Steam. It can be hundreds and hundreds of games in a 2 or 3 day period with significant amounts of them. Is there a puzzle here worth checking out? Maybe. And then I guess we'd also be in a weird situation if that one adult game was the only adult game that came out this Friday. But not that crazy. I like this turtle model, but I don't think this is an actual game. Really. I'll give it a chance though. Just because of the turtle model. Gun night all day. I guess I'll make YouTube shorts around top-down twin-stick shooters. Then we have Flying Carpets Over Shark-Infested Waters, which Doesn't look like anything. What's funny is we were getting duplicates of some tabs, but not all tabs. I just think my macro in general probably needs to run slower. Here we have a Japanese visual novel that's Japanese only, so we can't do anything with that. Survival Lost Way is mostly negative already, so we can say no to that. Then we have what looks like a full motion video game, although maybe it's been rotoscoped. I'm gonna give this a chance just because it looks weird. Regenesis again looks weird, so I'm gonna give it a chance. I can't really complain too much though if that was the only adult game that came out today, considering there was just a massive amount of adult games on Wednesday. But that would once again hint towards bundling. We can see this game Inkbound is already mixed, so I think we can say no to that. Animal Costume looks like a old Commodore 64 type game, so no to that. Transneurotica, maybe. And it's sad that this is basically all I can do is say maybe on some of these games, and then I need somebody else, some other reviewers to guide my own personal opinions. But I guess that's just what you have to do. Nobody has time to play every single game all the way from beginning to end to review it, and that's why we need consumer advice. And it definitely makes an argument that maybe too much art is just being made overall for society. If one individual civilian cannot enjoy all the art of society that they might want to enjoy, then perhaps ideas like copyright or having art be directly connected to payment and food and housing and resources, that whole concept might really, well, it is very broken. I don't have to say might, it is a very broken concept that art is being made a lot of times exclusively for profit, and instead of for the artist's own desire to actually create something meaningful. And too much is being made now because there's a profit motive connected. I think we can say no to Caveman Ransom here though. Whereas true art that would make you suffer and put your extra energy in your extra environment, people working a 8-hour shift and coming home and painting stuff that they have real passion for, that is the kind of art that we would prefer see created in society, or I would prefer to see created in society. This Future Racer 2000 is probably nothing, but I'm going to give it a chance. Ketamania. Does that have anything to do with ketamine? Apparently not. Dizzy Rogues. Give that a chance. And see, alright. So that was all the new games, if my macro ran correctly. So then let's see if we can just run Video Games Chronicle here and see what new news stories Video Games Chronicle would have found. Wait, Need to stop it. Need to flip this. Start over again. And since we're not doing anything, we'll just wait for the macro to do its job. So it's going down here and it's clicking on every link that I think the way this is programmed is that it's clicking on every link on this page if it suspects that anything on this page is new news. Then it will go to the second link and the second page and do the same, and then it will go to the third page if it actually needs to. Of course, obviously the macro is a little bit buggy, and it has to work in conjunction with several other extensions. And I think basically at this point, for my whole setup in general with the ad blocker and uBlock origins and all of that to work, I have to be on Firefox. So I made the right decision to move over to Firefox when I did. I could have seen myself being lazy and not moving over to Firefox and continuing to use Chrome, and that definitely could have been an issue. But you can see on this first page that they're going as far back as May 19th, which obviously we talked about things on May 19th. And see, now you have this like Cloudflare thing pop up, and that's continuously being a problem too, is that we're getting these Cloudflare pages, and I may straight up have to program a bot to click the box to say I'm not a bot and see if I can get away with that. It probably shouldn't work if that was the case, but it might. That would be a really stupid guard. But you can see that macro's not moving particularly fast, not at the speed that a computer could have gone to do that. And so these macros, when opening web pages, have to move really, really slow, and usually that means I have to walk away from the computer completely for a few minutes. Anyway, so this is the Video Games Chronicle articles. Some of these are old, like Mortal Kombat 1 DLC characters appearing to be leaked. We got no confirmation of the DLC characters like Homelander, but we did get confirmation that Mortal Kombat 1 reboot is happening. Jim Ryan says it's too early to judge the PlayStation VR 2's popularity. I don't know if there's ever really a legitimate argument to say it's too early to make a judgment on anything. It might be an early judgment or a snap judgment, but I think it's very fair if you needed to buy a gift today to say PlayStation VR 2 is not popular enough to buy it as a gift or buy it for yourself. AEW Fight Forever will reportedly be released in June. I feel like Gamatsu had the exact date. Let's see. You can now buy the Mario movie or rent it digitally in the UK. So here's the Pac-Man Lego set. And as best as I can tell, there's a crank here on the side, and it moves some ghosts around in kind of a chain pattern, and a Pac-Man around, and that's kind of it. So I think the mechanics basically move like maybe this ghost from this point to maybe this point, then back this way and this way in a circle, while also moving this guy possibly around in a circle. It seems fairly likely, from the little I've been able to see, that the power pellets and the regular pellets are points where no other Pac-Man thing can move. So like this corner here is not going to be anything. This corner here. And I bet there's not really any guarantee as far as the logic in the AI as far as where the ghosts will go. Pro people actually know that. There's also a button here that you can press down to light up a brick. And then this topper here is its own separate build, and there's a mechanism that spins it around and turns the ghosts into the Scaredy Ghost blue version, and then has Pac-Man spin around and go the other direction. I don't believe it's in any way connected to the crank or the rest of the unit. So what's weird about this is a tabletop approximation of what Pac-Man 1, not Miss Pac-Man, the more popular game, looks like. It's not terrible. I like the little joystick concept here, since that is the only thing a Pac-Man game would have, is a joystick, and then the player 1, player 2 buttons. But at like $270, this is a somewhat massively expensive thing. There's a giant sticker here, giant stickers here, another giant sticker of the same thing on the other side. I think there's some more stickers all over the place, so it's going to be very heavy in stickers, which a lot of people don't like stickers. If some of them are actually prints and not stickers, which this up here might actually be a print, that would be a little bit better. That being said, this feels like a set you would buy if you wanted a massive amount of yellow, but not even that many yellow bricks, or if you wanted a lot of internal mechanism. There's a whole nother aspect to it. See that they're not showing, in that there is a miniature minifig scale version of the Pac-Man arcade. Here, you can barely see it. Here, let's see if we can make that any bigger. Apparently not. Want to try that again? Nope. Corrupt image. Does this one want to work? Nope. Interesting. But here you can see the Pac-Man spun around, and then the Scaredy Ghosts. And here's the light that lights up when you press the button. Yeah, I just don't know what you really would have wanted for a Pac-Man. Probably, I would say, and I think this is a problem with most of these Lego sets now, is that there's far too much outer exterior framework building. I had the same problem with like the soccer foosball table. If you had just made this part and maybe the mechanism and put it in a much smaller Lego framework where it was just kind of in a black box, you could have saved yourself a massive amount of parts, which could have made this a much more reasonable expense. You could have spread it apart and had the head topper be its own separate set and the minifig be its own separate set, and then there could have been 3 Pac-Man sets instead of just one, and spread the price in that direction too. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And you can see there, your target fan here is an 80s lady, not little kids. Which I don't know if Pac-Man really was that popular amongst females in the 80s, because video games in general were not very welcoming in the 80s. So yeah, there's just this like chain drive, which apparently is a new piece. And then you can open the back and have the minifig characters. But the main thing that kills this really is the $270. Also, this box art is squished terribly. Like, I would not be very happy if this is the way the art looks when really it should be rotated 90 degrees, if anything. And what you have here also is a failure to really create something that's more interchangeable, because it would make a lot of sense to have this design be the default Pac-Man arcade and then have a customization set for like $70 or $80 to change it, where you would swap out these parts, swap out the topper, swap out the side art, and maybe swap out the console, but then the base amount of bricks to make a arcade would not need to be bought a second time. Of course, that's not very good for displaying a model, but then you would just buy 2 sets of the base arcade cabinet. Yeah, if there was just a generic arcade cabinet and it was Lego themed to start with, and then there were several licenses for Pac-Man, Mario, Sonic. There actually hasn't been a Sonic arcade game that I can think of, but you could make one up certainly. Like Mortal Kombat, even more mature arcade cabinet type games. If you thought down that path and made a whole series, that would be more intriguing. As it stands, if I wanted to make a Mario cabinet, the sides on the Mario cabinet would have been blue, so you'd need to swap out all of this yellow for it to be authentic, get a new sticker, new print, and then you could have Super Mario Brothers. At a certain level too, if this really worked and there was a screen here and they did some kind of cross promotion with like at Legends, the price would make a lot more sense also. For $270 to get a bunch of Lego bricks and a working Pac-Man only, or 5 Pac-Man games only. Yeah, that would be much nicer, certainly. It would be a hassle to spend $270 here and then try and put a screen that is an actual LCD and an actual controller. You could probably do it, but you'd probably end up gluing non-Lego stuff to Lego bricks quite a bit. And I don't think Lego has evolved into technology enough to go down that path. I also would have to heavily just consider, are there that many fans of Pac-Man compared to fans of Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 1 here, and the NES. In this case, you have the NES that is not really much of a playset, and it really is just a display model, and then you have the TV. And I wish this had turned into a series where you could have swapped out the games here and added more cartridges here, but they didn't go down that direction either. They haven't even made in a Super NES, which I would probably be a sucker for and buy a Super NES made out of Lego. But yeah, they haven't tried it. If they were to make a Super NES, there probably would be an argument to make a smaller TV, but even at that time, Super NESs would have still been played on big square TVs. But I don't know if there's really a justification to sell the TV a second time and build a different TV model just so you could have Super Mario World displayed, when you could just change the belt-driven scene and the whole Mario Brickheads concept. I think that was a dumb integration, but it was fine. Moving on, Alan Wake 2 is targeting an October release, claiming the actor. We talked about that. EA Sports says it has a huge confidence in its first game without the FIFA license. Okay. Oh, obviously it would say that, and most information seems to point to that being true. We talked about Tears of the Kingdom being delayed for over a year for polish. Let's see, AEW Fight Forever has a release date. We talked about that. Xbox games are coming to the cloud gaming service Boostroid in June, starting with Deathloop, Gears 5, Grounded, and Pentiment. There is, I suppose, a danger here in which Xbox all of a sudden says we should just put all of our games on other people's services and get rid of Game Pass. I don't think they do that anytime soon in the next decade or so, but I could see Microsoft saying it's actually better for them to hand over a lot of the account management and finances and charging to another company and just take a license fee for doing less work. Square Enix apparently has discussed ditching the numbered Final Fantasy titles. They give players the impression that they need to play older games first, says Final Fantasy XVI's producer. It's a smart move, frankly. They should have done it a long time ago. The problem with it that you'd run into, though, is that there are Final Fantasy spin-off games that don't have number titles on them, and you are going to very quickly, since Final Fantasy games get released on a fairly frequent basis, that you're going to have something called Final Fantasy Feudal Lords or something, and then you'll have something called Final Fantasy New Dawn, and it will just be even more confusing as far as whether Feudal Lords or New Dawn came out first. Those are two just made up subtitle names. At a certain point, they might as well just put a year at the end of it. Final Fantasy 2023. It's not like they're going to make two in 1 year. I also saw an article, I don't think we have it here, that said Sony of Japan came out and said yes, they are still very much focused on making Japanese games. And they were saying this to a Japanese audience, of course. So, yeah. There seems to be some concern that they felt they needed to relieve as far as whether Sony Entertainment Interactive is going too Western, which I suspect it probably actually is, in the sense that they've let Jim Ryan and Sony of California take over. 3 or 4 pretty big announcements are planned for the Summer Game Fest live show. The year's kickoff event takes place June 8th. Jeff Keighley. We talked about Ubisoft's Star Wars game planned for release in March of 2024. Diablo 4 story trailer sets the scene ahead of next month's release. Spider-Man isn't a co-op game. Spider-Man 2 is not a co-op game. Insomniac has confirmed. It's an epic single-player adventure, which I'm not sure who really would have thought it would have been. I suppose it could be, in that you would play as Miles Morales or Spider-Man, and one would have to play as one or the other. But when you think about who Peter Parker and Miles Morales are as Spider-Man, they really are solo acts and just not likely to do a lot of co-op actions. And yeah, Miles Morales is supposed to be a younger guy, but this gets back to the fat characters depiction from Marvel comics straight into video game translations, and that you have a Peter Parker here that's very muscly and ripped in his chest and six packs and not really any fat at all. And then if anything, they've made Miles Morales perhaps a little bit shorter and smaller and not as ripped in the pecs and the abs, but They're all wearing skin-tight suits. Pretty much anybody who would have been fat in a Marvel or DC comic would have been a joke character like the Blob. And that comes down to just artists not wanting to draw big characters. Alright, so that apparently was all the news, so we really wouldn't have missed that much anyways, had we skipped all the Video Games Chronicles articles. I'm expecting more news over the next couple days, but we are getting also close to the United States Memorial Day weekend, so I wouldn't be surprised if that is contributing to a general slowdown in video game news. Or it could just also be that everybody's playing Tears of the Kingdom, and that's why there's a slowdown of video game news. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos because that helps me with YouTube. There's a bunch of social media support and support links like to Patreon down below in the description box if you want to support me further or follow me on other services. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.